I seem to be able to put my feelings down in a song easier than I can talk about it. I play me better than anybody.
People have always called Willie Nelson the Buddha of country music, the peaceful one, the man who never held a grudge, who forgave everyone, who moved through life with a quiet smile and an open heart. For decades, that was the story the world told about him, and most people believed it without question. But at 92 years old, Willie Nelson is done letting that story stand. Because the truth, according to those closest to him, is something very different. There are 7 names, 7 people who hurt him, betrayed him, mocked what he believed in, or broke something that could never be fixed. Some of them were legends, some of them were like family, and at least one of them was the last person anyone would ever expect to find on a list like this. If you want to hear the real Willie Nelson, the unfiltered version that Nashville has quietly known about for years, stay right here. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. We cover the stories behind the stories in country music, the ones that don't make the polished press releases and the award show speeches. We're building something real here, and we'd love to have you with us. Hit that subscribe button and the like button before we go any further. It genuinely helps us grow and keeps this kind of honest storytelling coming. Now, let's get into it. The first name on Willie's list is Garth Brooks, and honestly, for anyone who knows Willie Nelson's relationship with authenticity, this one shouldn't be a surprise. To the outside world, Garth Brooks is the man who brought country music to football stadiums, the showman who made the whole genre bigger than it had ever been. But to Willie, that bigness was exactly the problem. The feud between them has its roots in the early days, back when Willie was still grinding dusty highways with his battered guitar Trigger, playing for working people in small rooms, who sometimes could barely scrape together the price of a ticket. Meanwhile, Garth was flying across massive arenas on wires, surrounded by pyrotechnics in spectacle, drawing crowds that had never thought of themselves as country music fans before. Willie watched all of it and felt something dying. Not jealousy, something more like grief. To him, country music was always supposed to be about truth, about singing what you had actually lived, about connecting with people through shared pain and shared joy. When Friends in Low Places felt more like a Broadway production than a barroom confession, Willie saw the moment the genre stopped being about truth and started being about business. That wound never closed. The tension came to a head in 2004 at the Country Music Hall of Fame. Garth stood on stage and called Willie the conscience of country music, smiling warmly for the cameras while the audience applauded. It looked like a beautiful moment of respect between generations, but backstage, Willie leaned in close and said just 7 words. "Next time, sing it like you mean it." Those words moved through Nashville fast, and from that night on, Willie turned down every duet, every shared stage, every photo opportunity with Garth Brooks. To Willie, what Garth built was plastic perfection, technically impressive, commercially dominant, and completely hollow at its core. The second name is Shania Twain, and this one is about what Willie saw as the pop country revolution that nearly killed the soul of the genre. Willie wasn't a man who hated glamour on principle. He had no problem with rhinestones and stage lights. What made him furious about Shania's rise was something deeper. He felt like she had taken country music and turned it into choreography, that the emotional truth at the heart of the genre had been replaced with catchy hooks, dance routines, and radio formulas designed to pull in audiences who had no connection to the traditions of the music. In the late 90s, when Man, I Feel Like a Woman and That Don't Impress Me Much were everywhere, Nashville was celebrating like it had never celebrated before. Willie was on tour, telling a sound engineer quietly that country music is supposed to bleed, not sparkle. Those words got around, and pretty soon everyone in the industry understood where Willie stood. The breaking point came at the CMA Awards, when Shania was named Entertainer of the Year. Willie was sitting just a few rows behind her. The cameras caught him clapping and smiling, the polished image of a gracious elder statesman. But backstage, he leaned toward a friend and said just 7 words. "Next time, sing it like you mean it." Those words moved through Nashville fast, and from that night on, Willie turned down every duet, every shared stage, every photo opportunity with Garth Brooks. To Willie, what Garth built was plastic perfection, technically impressive, commercially dominant, and completely hollow at its core. Even today, people who know him say that if you mention Shania Twain, he quietly changes the subject. The third name is the one that cuts the deepest, and that's Waylon Jennings. Because this one wasn't about artistic differences or philosophical arguments about genre. This was personal. This was blood. Willie and Waylon built the outlaw country movement together, two rebels pushing back against the polished Nashville machine, recording what they wanted, living how they wanted, refusing to let the industry grind them down into something safe and sellable. They were brothers in every sense that mattered. But underneath the brotherhood, something dark had been growing for years. By the late 70s, Waylon had started to feel like he was living in Willie's shadow. Every headline seemed to put Willie's name first, Waylon and Willie, not Waylon and Willie. To most people, that would seem like a small thing. To Waylon, it clearly wasn't. He started showing up late to recording sessions. He was drinking harder. He picked arguments about songwriting credits. People close to both of them said Waylon would visibly roll his eyes when someone called Willie the face of outlaw country. One night in the studio, it finally broke open. Waylon snapped and said Willie was too stoned to play straight. Willie smiled and said nothing, but he didn't forget. The friendship shattered completely a few years later during a joint interview in the early 80s when Waylon, half laughing and half resentful, called Willie a hippie in cowboy boots who had forgotten where he came from. The reporters laughed. Willie did not. When the cameras stopped rolling, he stood up quietly and walked away. He never called Waylon again. And when Waylon Jennings died in 2002, Willie did not go to the funeral. He sent flowers and a handwritten note that read simply, "See you on the road somewhere." People close to Willie said that was his way of saying goodbye, while also admitting that the wound between them had never fully healed. The fourth name is Toby Keith, and this feud was never about music at all. It was about what Willie believed music was for. Willie once said publicly that a guitar should never wave a flag. Everyone in Nashville knew exactly who that line was aimed at. Their conflict came to a head in the early 2000s after Toby released Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, which became a massive patriotic anthem and commercial success. Willie heard something different in it. He heard propaganda dressed up as country music, pride weaponized for an audience that wanted anger rather than healing. The moment that ended any hope of peace between them came at a veteran benefit concert in Austin. Willie performed first, speaking about unity and the human cost of war. Then Toby came out and turned the whole event into something closer to a political rally, waving flags and shouting slogans. Willie watched from backstage and felt genuinely disgusted. When Toby came off stage, Willie stopped him and told him directly that he was using music to fight rather than to heal. Toby laughed and walked away. That was it. From that night forward, Willie refused to share a lineup, a benefit bill, or even a poster with Toby Keith. Behind closed doors, he described Toby's act as a commercial wrapped in camouflage. Years later, Toby tried to reach out through a mutual friend to say he had meant no harm. Willie never replied. He told his crew that he had met louder men, but not many emptier ones. The fifth name is Merle Haggard, and this one is perhaps the most painful of all because of how long and how deep the friendship ran before it broke. Willie and Merle had shared buses and motel rooms and stages for decades. Together, they had built a sound that reshaped country music from the ground up. Merle wasn't some industry figure Willie had grown to distrust. He was a genuine road brother, the kind of friend you think nothing can ever fully destroy. But Merle started making jokes in interviews about Willie's marijuana use, suggesting that it had turned him into more of a mascot than a working musician. At first, Willie brushed it off. Then Merle said it again, this time on a stage with Willie sitting just feet away. He looked out at the crowd and said that weed was a lazy man's crutch. The audience laughed. Willie kept strumming, finished the song, and walked to his bus without saying a single word to anyone. The planned joint album between them quietly disappeared from the schedule. Willie's manager started declining Merle's calls. Fans kept waiting for a reunion that never came. When Merle eventually reached out to apologize and said it had just been a joke, Willie replied with one simple line. He said, "Some things you don't joke about." Not rage, just disappointment, which in many ways is worse. When Merle Haggard died in 2016, Willie called him one of the greats in his public statement, but people who were close to both men noticed that he never once said Merle had been one of his best friends. That silence carried everything that needed to be said.
The sixth name is Chris Christopherson, and this one is almost harder to understand because of how long and how solid their bond had been. These two men were not just peers, they had carried each other through some of the hardest stretches of their lives, shared the same storms, the same losses, the same complicated journey through fame and everything that comes with it, 40 years of genuine brotherhood. And it ended with one sentence. It happened at a private fundraiser sometime in the mid-2000s. Willie had just finished performing a quiet, aching song about farm workers and the human cost of war, something honest and careful and deeply personal. When he stepped off the stage, Chris was already in the middle of a loose circle of songwriters, a few drinks in, laughing. And loud enough for the room to hear, Chris said that Willie had turned into more of a mascot than a musician. The room laughed. Willie heard every word. People nearby said he went still for just a moment, then turned and walked out into the night without speaking. By the next morning, his assistant had already canceled their upcoming duet session. The phone calls stopped. The friendship went silent. When asked about it later, Willie said only that some words don't fade, they stain. Chris tried to apologize through a mutual friend. Willie refused to meet. His only response was quiet and final. He said, "You don't get to call me brother after that." The seventh and final name is Kid Rock, and this one is less about a broken friendship and more about a fundamental collision between two completely different ideas of what music is and what it means. Around 2008, during Kid Rock's self-described outlaw phase, he approached Willie with an idea for a collaboration, a raw, genre-bending anthem that would push boundaries and surprise people. Willie, who has always been genuinely open to experimentation and unusual partnerships, said yes. He showed up ready to work. Kid Rock showed up late with a beer in his hand, already playing his own music at full volume over the studio speakers. Musicians who were there that night said he ignored every bit of direction, kept shouting for everything to be louder and rawer, and drowned Willie's vocals under walls of distortion. Willie stayed calm and suggested a softer, more soulful approach to the song. Kid Rock smirked at him and said, "Come on, old man, loosen up." Willie quietly took off his headphones, stood up, and walked out. The session ended on the spot. The track was never finished or released. When a journalist later asked what had happened, Willie said simply that some fires are better left unlit, but people who know him say the disgust was real and lasting. Since that night, he has turned down every collaboration, every shared event, and every handshake with Kid Rock. To Willie, Kid Rock was just another loud voice with nothing real underneath it. 7 names, 7 broken bonds. Some ended with silence, some with a single cutting sentence, and some with years of quiet distance that never fully closed. The man the world called the Buddha of country music, the one who forgave everyone and held no grudges, carried all of this. And at 92, those wounds are still there. What do you make of all this? Were these the right calls, or should time have done more healing? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and keep the conversation going.